Good. Cool. Look at my pen. I had it just now. Found it. Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's City Planning Commission hearing. Today is September 12th, 2023. First, we'll start off by calling business to order and start with a roll call. And that'll follow with the reading of the formal public hearing rules. So Commissioner Lund.
Here.
Commissioner Witry.
Present.
Commissioner Jordan, present. Commissioner Brown.
Present.
Commissioner Stewart.
Present.
Commissioner Steig.
Here.
So we have a quorum. Next up, I'll read the formal public hearing rules. The City Planning Commission has established certain rules governing the procedures to be followed at public hearings. Before speaking, each person shall give their name, address, and state whom he or she is representing. Proponents for the proposal will speak first for a period of 10 minutes. Each speaker shall be allowed a maximum of 2 minutes. Opponents or other interested parties will speak second for a period of 15 minutes. Each speaker shall be allowed a maximum of 2 minutes. Proponents will be allowed a period of 6 minutes for a rebuttal. Each speaker shall be allowed a maximum of 2 minutes. Opponents will not be allowed to rebut. No material, written matter, photographs, maps, etc. will be accepted by the commission or its staff at any time during the public hearing. This procedure shall be followed except at such a time when the presiding officer shall, with the approval of the commission members present, extend such time. And now we'll begin with, first up with the adoption of meeting minutes for August.
Mr. Chair, I will move to approve as corrected. The items number 11 and 12, I believe. I was a nay vote. It was the subdivision that was in violation of the laws and covenants of Lakeville.
Oh, your mic was off.
Item 11, 12. 12 was correct, I believe, but those are subdivision dockets 97 and 98. I was a nay vote. I believe they've been corrected.
Are there any other corrections?
Commissioner Witry will second.
Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll call the vote. Commissioner Lund,
Yes.
Commissioner Alexander,
Yes.
Commissioner Witry,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan, yes, Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Stewart,
Yes.
Commissioner Steig,
Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Joshi Gupta. The meeting minutes have been adopted. Next up is zoning docket 05523.
The zoning docket 05523 is a community solar text amendment. It's a bit technical, so we have a presentation for you guys. So what is community solar? Community solar projects are becoming a popular means for local jurisdictions to expand ways to generate more clean energy. City Council recently finalized rules for citywide community solar program that allows community solar facilities to generate up to 5 megawatts of energy. The premise of a community solar project is that multiple subscribers can purchase shares of a solar facility's energy output to the utility grid and in return receive credit on the subscriber's electric bill. The intent of the text amendment changes within the CZR are first to expand solar energy development opportunities as a principal use in more zoning districts throughout the city. And secondly, to better define the site design standards for ground mounted solar energy systems used as a principal or an accessory use in all zoning districts. So the motion as passed by City Council was smaller in concept to modify the collective solar energy system clause and add community solar projects as a definition within the site design standards attached. As staff researched the effectiveness of the current text within the CZO to enable solar projects to develop, it was determined that there would be a need to further edit and better clarify how and where solar energy facilities could be developed, either as a principal or accessory use. In reviewing community solar projects across the US, the scale and size of potential projects meant that the text amendment proposed would have to be adapted to be more appropriate in scope and impact. The text amendments as proposed by staff ultimately does answer the problem being addressed, which is the lack of provisions in the CZO to accommodate solar development opportunities. The text amendment proposes definitions and accessory site design standards to accommodate a wide range of both building and ground mounted solar arrays, and provides specific flexibility for institutional campuses, medical campuses, and nonprofit organizations or a public entity to maximize their land for the purpose of producing renewable energy that benefits all residents. The motion started with a self-contained concept with modifying the collective solar clause, but as, I'm sorry, that's a repeat. Let's go on to the next. So specifically, we expanded solar energy system uses as a principal use in many different areas to better define it by size. But we also went ahead and we opened up permissions in Article 15 in heavy commercial, educational campus districts, medical campus, medical service districts, and life sciences districts. And then within Article 21, we actually removed collective alternative energy system to eliminate confusion. It was determined to do so because we found that there wasn't a use case for this ever used since it was inserted into the CZO in 2015, but also it was kind of generally describing what we consider a microgrid, but microgrids are not defined within the CZO. So we are requesting that a future text amendment come before you defining what a microgrid can be used as in the city.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
So basically we removed collective alternative energy system, and we are, because it's never been used, and we're requesting a future text amendment come before you guys to define what a microgrid is. And
That would be alternative language,
yeah,
alternate language this, but for the time being, we're going to refer. to
yeah, we
this
did
one.
not include a definition for microgrid in
Okay.
this.
Thanks.
And then, so we can go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So then within, further within section 21 and 21.60D, solar energy systems, it was listed as private. We recommend changing that to actually just say accessory use. And we further expanded how you could do a ground mounted solar array that directly connects to the grid as an accessory use by scale and by size. And we also implemented site design standards of setbacks, fencing, and I neglected to mention that we did that also in principal use as well. So, and then finally, within the definitions, we did insert a definition of what a community solar project is, and we inserted size-based energy systems being small scale and large scale. Small scale being up to 5 acres, and large scale being greater than 5 acres of a solar array. So the next steps would be for you guys to vote on our recommendation for approval. And then will be transmitted to City Council. Once the motion and ordinance are approved, CPC staff intends to implement or produce an implementation guide for safety and permits to help with these new regulations. So that is a summary of a very technical document, but I'm definitely here for if you have questions of the details.
Thank you. We don't have any cards, but are there any questions for staff?
Yes. Okay, please be patient with me because I'm just gonna go through to try to understand this better. So when I read that collective alternative energy systems shall be built in accordance with accessory use standards for the particular type of energy system used. Could you give me an example of what that means in terms of, so I know there are accessory use standards, but how does that apply to a type of energy used? What is that sentence?
So the definitions within collective alternative energy system were basically saying that if you had a solar or geothermal or a wind system that and multiple landowners wanted to use their properties, you could combine the lots to have those systems operate. But that was never a use case that was ever used. So our recommendation is to take that out completely and replace with basically a microgrid facility, which would allow in the future, if it's possible, allow energy to be produced without and neighboring properties tap into that. But right now there's not a use case nor a utility agreement to kind of allow that at a utility scale for people to go behind the grid. You can kind of do that and have a battery on your own house, but it's not a utility scale use right now.
So this proposal is for generating energy through some type of system that would cross property line, more than one property owner, but the energy would be used off-site from where the facility is located, correct?
So our recommendation is to not do that at all. So the proposal was to amend that text, but we're saying eliminate that whole provision of collective alternative energy system. So.
And your proposal is, okay, so it could be used on-site and off-site, the energy.
Our proposal is basically to allow a utility scale solar array facility, which would be ground mounted generally,
Okay.
up to, and there's different scales, but our proposal is to allow that to directly connect to the grid. And it has different setback requirements, fencing requirements, and it's just considered either a utility scale or it's just for the purpose of someone's, use on site for their own property. But utility scale would just go directly into the utility grid.
Okay.
It's very technical.
I know. So this is your recommendations for modifying the motion, right? For modifying the city council motion, but you'll be coming back to us with more detailed or no?
Right now, we're requesting you approve what our text. And then if there is a proposal to add microgrid in the future, we would love to see that.
Okay. Now this question isn't anything that I see in here, but in this document, but I know that when the city allowed for rooftop solar and companies came in and they did leases on people on their private property solar, as someone who worked in real estate, what we ran into was a real problem because whatever was agreed upon in the management contracts, when people went to sell their property, it was not generally known, but they had this lease in place for the solar on their roof, but it was difficult to get information about it. So I have a concern about the management plans that would be set up and whether or not they would be able to be monitored, and that when people go to sell their property, it be something that is not in the way. You know, that there be clear guidelines for where to go, what needs to be done in order to sell a property.
Yeah, we did place into the new standards at least a decommissioning and abandonment clause.
Mhm.
So in the case that the facility is not being used, that they have to remove it per safety and permits, guidance. But I can see your recommendation of having more description
Yeah.
in a future implementation guide to safety and permits being very useful. So we'll make
Okay.
note of that for
Okay.
sure.
And the arrays could be leased or purchased? Is that addressed in here?
That's not addressed in this. We're mainly just the use of the property. But all of that would have to be part of, the guidelines and the regulations. One would have to
Okay.
do with safety and permits.
Yeah, so it's kind of the same thing. I would ask you to address that too, particularly if they're leased, that how does that affect the property owners, you know? Thanks.
Are there any more questions for staff?
I have another question on how did you work with the historic districts? I know you have some guidelines here, but specifically I wanted to know how does it affect historic districts and historic buildings?
So HDLC has guidelines that regulate how they deal with solar installations. Usually their concern is rooftop mounted solar because that's what's visible. These regulations apply. They're for non almost either utility size installation or kind of smaller than utility, but still up to 5 acres. So not your standard rooftop solar, where basically, you've got a large property, it's being covered with ground mounted solar panels, or basically, pretty close to grade level, usually not in historic districts. So I think the question of how HDLC will regulate it is a little bit outside of this. This creates a permission. And then in those limited cases where it is in the local historic district, which again will be a minority, they would also have to comport with HDLC's design guidelines.
I was concerned about open lots or vacant lots in historic districts. And if someone were to convert them into an array or, do something, were there any specific things that you thought about or guidelines that you were thinking about?
We generally, there were two use cases already, solar gardens and solar farms, and we recommended retiring those languages for these scale-based. And we kept what was already permitted as a solar garden. And generally, a lot of the more historic neighborhoods or residential were already a conditional use. And we kept with that, didn't change anything within the CZO. So there would still be oversight in that way.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions for staff, I'm looking for a motion.
There was one card.
Oh, because two, not one.
my fault. Here, we have 2 cards.
Thank you. Okay, I have, first up, Jesse George, and then followed by Lee LeBlanc.
Thank you. Jesse George on behalf of the Alliance for Affordable Energy, 4505 South Claiborne Avenue. So we've been involved with the creation of the community solar rules at the city council since the beginning in 2018. The reason the council sent this motion to the planning commission is because since that time, there's been no development in community solar in New Orleans. So we're encouraged to see these changes being proposed. However, we do have some concerns. I would like to say we're very much in favor of the decommissioning rules. I think that's an important measure to protect citizens from abandoned projects. However, I would urge you not to adopt the definition of community solar project as proposed, because it limits the ownership and operation of these projects to utility companies under the definition as proposed. I would urge you instead to conform the definition more closely to the definition in the community solar rules as adopted by the city council, which allows for ownership and operation not only by utilities, but by any for-profit or nonprofit entity or organization. This definition before you today would limit ownership of these projects to Entergy, basically, which would be a significant step backward in terms of community solar development and would be contrary to the council's intentions in sending this motion here. So thank you very much, and I ask you to take that into consideration.
So question for staff.
We've been discussing with them and it was really an issue of where I put my comma, but it wasn't meant to eliminate nonprofits or public or private, but it was a grammatical error that can
Okay.
read technically. So
So do we need once we get to a vote, do we need to add any language, or is the change of the comma going to take care of that concern?
we could
Why don't you just suggest? we get to that? Should they?
yeah, I mean, we can make a recommended edit.
Can I suggest that whatever motion, just come with a note that the intention is to allow for this, and then we can.
Good, you can do it however
Okay,
makes it work. Okay, great. Thanks.
Next up is Leah LeBlanc. No, no comment? Do we have any other cards? Okay, there are no other cards. Oh, wait. 1 second. Okay. There are no other cards. So if there's no further discussion, I'll look for a motion.
Okay, I move for approval of zoning document 5523 with, what is it, modification? Help. Modification.
I guess it would be to not limit the provider to a utility provider, but any profit or any entity.
Okay, so to allow for ownership of these solar facilities to be not just the utility, but also any private or nonprofit owner is a viable owner.
I'll second.
Commissioner Lund made a motion, Commissioner Steve second. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the vote. Or vote your machines. Wait. Yeah. so-
I mean, it's working, but it's. That's one.
Frozen. Okay, so now we're just, so our machines are frozen, so we're gonna go ahead and call a vote out loud. Commissioner Lund,
Yes.
Commissioner Alexander, Commissioner Joshi
Yes.
Gupta,
Yes.
Commissioner Witchery,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan, yes, Commissioner Brown.
Yes,
Commissioner Stewart,
Yes.
Commissioner Steve.
Yes.
The zoning docket passes. You start getting used to technology and then it falls apart. So next up is zoning docket item 06823.
Zoning docket 05623.
Is that what I? Yeah. 56. No. Yeah. I'm sorry, y'all. Forgive me. Zoning docket 05623.
This is a request for city council motion M23231 for a text amendment to Article 14, Section 14.2A, Table 1114, Table 14-1 of the comprehensive zoning ordinance to disallow dwellings above the ground floor, townhouses, multifamily dwellings, group homes, small and large, and permanent supportive housing in the SLM Lake Area Marina District. The proposed text amendment would affect all properties in the SLM district by amending Article 14 of the comprehensive zoning ordinance to only permit residential boathouses. This limitation on residential development will be consistent with the district's existing land use pattern, which features boathouses as a primary residential development. Presently, the SLM district contains existing multi-story, multi-family dwellings and dwellings above the ground floor, which will become non-conforming uses. Nevertheless, staff find the proposed restriction to be compatible with the master plan, as the master plan limits residential uses to single-family dwellings and boathouses. Therefore, staff recommends approval.
Is there anyone from council present? If not, we have one common card in opposition. Ron Duplessis.
Good afternoon. I'm Ron Duplessis, 7300 Lakeshore Drive, New Orleans, Louisiana. I am the president of the Homeowners Association of the Lighthouse Harbor Condominiums. And to my understanding, this particular change in the ordinance would make our 40-year-old complex in good repair with a 92-year lease remaining non-compliant. I think, I don't know how we got pushed into this section being across the canal, but my gosh, this changes the asset base of mortgage companies. It changes our lease with the Lakeshore Management Authority. And virtually, we have nothing to do with anything across the canal. And I think a lot of people are opposed to mass change without transparency and clarity of what we've seen. And I've attended every meeting for the last year and a half. We're quite confused by all this. The Marina Authority has ordered studies, and this is all seemingly based upon change of redeveloping the Fret Park, which is very constrictive in many ways. And it has a lot of entities and a lot of property managers, including Jefferson Parish. So to pass this, I think without the proper notice, we have not received notice of this. And I'm not sure that any of the other agencies, the condominiums and developments there that have been there for years have received notice. So I would ask the commission, number one, to defer this, provide proper notice, transparency and clarity, and certainly remove Lakeshore Drive from this ordinance, because we have absolutely nothing to do with it. Basically, the question is, why isn't Felix's and the Blue Crab and a number of other businesses, what do they have to do with this? Well, the answer is nothing. So I pray to the commission to defer this or amend Lakeshore Drive from this particular ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff?
I would like the staff to respond to the concern of Mr. Duplessis.
Sure. So generally the purpose of this really kind of, let me start over. This property has a mixed use maritime master plan designation. And so what that is contemplating is commercial uses such as restaurants and very limited residential use, basically limited to boathouses. So the master plan, the allowable range of uses, and the area we're talking about is the area highlighted in blue on the map, says you can have just commercial uses and residential limited to boathouses. And of course, the master plan is the basis for zoning. So zoning has to do what the master plan allows. When this was implemented in terms of zoning, the zoning that was adopted was much more permissive in terms of the residential uses that it allows than the master plan was. So while the master plan only allows boathouses essentially as residential uses here, the zoning that implemented the master plan allowed multifamily, single family, permanent supportive housing, other residential types. The proposal then is to shrink that back down so that it aligns with the master plan. So, so getting rid of those residential use types that are not allowed by that underlying master plan designation. So that's why we're recommending approval. Basically, it takes the residential uses that the zoning allows and matches it to what the master plan allows. Now, there is the implication of that is that some existing multifamily, which predates the current zoning, predates the current master plan, would become legally non-conforming by virtue of that change.
Thank you. So the condominiums that Mr. Duplessis is speaking of, they're legal non-conforming, and until the building is not used for that purpose, they are legally.
Sure. So the way legal non-conforming works is that you retain the right to use the property, but if it goes totally vacant for more than 6 months, that property right is lost, and then it's allowed to only be used in a way that the zoning allows. And so for any, you know, multifamily that would become non-conforming, it becomes very important if it goes totally vacant and for how long it goes totally vacant.
And by totally vacant, you mean the entire complex, not any particular owner. So
Right. I mean,
that
ultimately,
transferring-
it's a safety and permits determination on a case by case, but for a fourplex, for example, all 4 units have to go vacant before the structure is considered to have stopped use.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for staff?
Do we know how many non-conforming multifamily buildings are in this neighborhood that's being proposed?
Staff counted 4 buildings total. Of
And-
4 sites total.
That are going to be non-conforming. Also, I just wanted to know what was the basis even in the master plan for this particular change?
I think without, great recollection of sort of the master plan community meetings that led to this, I think in general, the thought was likely to create a future land use designation that was consistent with how, the kind of unique nature of this area and the fact that it historically had a mix of boathouses, which were an unusual residential type and commercial and other lakefront activity. I don't know if there was conscious thought to, as it relates to the multifamily one way or another, but I think in general, the thought was to create a master plan land use classification that matched the historical mixed use of this area.
My last question is, was there a neighborhood meeting or what were the, what was the commentary during those meetings?
Sure. So this is a council initiated action. The council held an NPP meeting in advance or in conjunction with initiating the motion. CPC staff did not attend, but they did provide notes as an attachment to the motion. So that's included within the staff report.
Mr. Chairman, I did bring a study of the master plan that we did within the area, and I'd like to submit it to, I hope I'm not out of order if I am, I apologize, but I did bring complete study to the master plan that we did in the local area in a collaboration of all the dwellings that would fall under this consideration.
Commissioner Lund,
Oh, I move to accept the study.
is there a second? Well, first
Second.
I'll make a motion to suspend the rules. One
I
is,
can't make a motion. I'll make the motion.
oh,
I'll make a motion to suspend the rules so that we can accept the information provided by the Mr. Duplessis.
is there a second?
Second,
All in favor? Okay,
okay, I'd like to move to accept the study from the audience representative. Yeah, so we need a second, right?
is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Pass it that way. Are there any more questions for staff?
I have a question. This plan in no way infringes on the green space and recreation areas as they are currently, correct?
That's correct. Those have separate park master plan designations. So
Okay.
they would be unaffected.
Right. I just, I'm noting a lot of concern in the written comments that remain in place. And from what I can see, it is not going to be changed, but I just wanted to say that on the record that that is not something that is contemplated here, that those would in any way be compromised by what is proposed.
That's correct.
I have a question. Does this affect any commercially zoned property?
So it doesn't affect properties that have a pure solely commercial zoning. The zoning that implements this SLM does allow for some commercial use. So it's not strictly a commercial district, but it is a district that allows some commercial use.
Okay, but there aren't any changes being made to that, only to the,
The changes, right, do not affect
Only-
the commercial uses that the district allows.
only the more intense residential use.
Right.
Okay. I mean, I just have a comment. Can I go ahead and say it now?
Yep.
That, you know, I live in that area and, yeah, I do have concern about high rises, especially with proposed development or being considered for where the restaurants used to be, Fitzgerald, et cetera, when I was growing up. And everything was at a scale and always has been at a scale of lower and more not at all like a Miami canal front type of atmosphere. So I would have a concern if we didn't try to keep that scale of residential building in the area. So I'm very much in favor of this. Thank you.
Question for staff, are we on deadline?
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for staff? If not, I'll ask for a motion.
Does this zoning change affect the land lease with the levy board at all for the boathouses?
This is not a zoning change. This is a text amendment to allow residential uses to be restricted to solely boat houses in the SLM district.
But it would not affect the leases.
Okay.
Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Second,
Commissioner Brown moves to approve, seconded by Commissioner Lund. Is there any further discussion? If not, we'll call the vote. Commissioner Lund?
I
Oh,
think we
the
can
machines are up.
vote.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll vote on machines.
Been warmed up.
Zoning docket 05623 passes. Next up is zoning docket 06823.
Zoning docket 06823 is a request for a conditional use to permit a small childcare center in an SRS suburban single-family residential district. The owner of the Little Schoolhouse Child Development Center located at 3843 General Meyer Avenue is proposing to expand the daycare service to include the subject site for the purpose of providing childcare to infants under the age of 18 months. The proposed daycare, which includes approximately 528 square feet of available indoor play extraction area, is allowed up to 15 children. The site is developed with 2 off-street parking spaces, therefore the proposal meets the minimum off-street parking requirement. No new construction is proposed. The use of the structure for the childcare would provide a valued service to the community. Nonetheless, it is important to balance that with the need to protect the quality of life for the adjacent residential properties. Prior to final approval, the applicant will be required to provide the required outdoor play area. The applicant would also be required to provide a 6-foot solid fence around the play area adjacent to any abutting property line, which would address any adverse impacts to the neighboring residential properties. The proposed use would not cause material damage or prejudice to other properties in the vicinity, and no variances are required. The proposal is consistent with the master plan, and the staff recommends approval with 14 provisos.
Thank you. We have one speaker card from the applicant, Jenna Stevens.
Hello, I'm Gina Stevens. I've owned the daycare next to it that we're proposing. I've been there 10 years. Childcare is something that is hard to find right now. And there's a lot of centers that are being proposed to close. Infant care especially is very hard to find. And we are asking that we can acquire the property next door to expand just for infant care, which would help our community greatly. And I just want to thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Could you come back to the mic really quick and just state your address for the record?
Which one? The one I'm proposing or where we are now?
Just your residence.
My residence is 118 Tinsley Drive in Belchase.
Great. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
We have one more card, I think, of Nick Kendall.
Hello, thank you all very much for having me here or allowing me to speak. My name is Nick Kendall. I'm the Director for Facilities with Agenda for Children. And Agenda for Children, we're a nonprofit organization that looks to expand childcare in New Orleans and across Southeast Louisiana. So we're here in support of this request. This facility would serve a very important need in the area, especially in Algiers. Based on the research we've done, Algiers is one of the neighborhoods that really does need additional childcare centers. So we would appreciate your support of this request. I do have a couple of questions and comments I would like to make on the report. First is just clarification about the bulk requirements. So on page 4 of the report and talking about the actual required lot size, it kind of refers to the lot size of the expanded facility as well as combining that with the area of the lot size of the facility next door. There isn't any proposed provisos requiring a subdivision or anything. And I just want to make sure that a subdivision will not be required in this case because these properties actually have 2 separate owners. It's all one business, but subdivision wouldn't be possible due to the separate ownership. And then my other comment is regarding proviso 3. And so this proviso says the maximum number of children permitted at this facility is 15 in accordance with CZO Article 20, Section 20.3 S1C. And so my request would be that we do not put an exact number in this proviso. Just from my experience, years down the line, if someone kind of proposes modifications to the facility that might, increase the number of students to 16 or 17, we then have this proviso that would restrict it only to 15 as well. I believe there's maybe a reference to the wrong code section. I believe it should be subsection 2B instead of 1C. 2B kind of has the maximum size or maximum number of children based on the floor area of the structure. So I would request that that gets updated to the correct citation. All right, thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Kendall. Could you state your address really quick for the record?
Sorry, my home address is 4103 Annunciation Street. Thank you all.
Mr. Crowe?
So there's not a re-subdivision requirement. There is a requirement that the two facilities, both the original site that operates now and this expansion site, be used together, and that's sort of built into provisos 5 and 6. So if the applicant is okay with the two facilities being tied together in terms of the operation, though allowed to be under two separate lots with two separate owners, that would meet the zoning requirements.
Okay.
Yes, and this will all be one business and that's fine with us. So thank you.
And there was one other question.
Oh, yeah, we also don't have an objection to striking
proviso.
the explicit reference to 15, whatever the regulation allows in terms of total student population is what it allows, and there's no need to sort of kind of artificially insert a 15 student limit.
Mhm.
I mean, we're good with just the reference to the section. I'll also note that one of the speakers mentioned there are 14 provisos, which is true. There's also one waiver, so just and that has to do with the street loading requirement. So just want to have that in front of you as well.
So, quick question, does that bring us down to 13 provisos, given the recent?
No,
Like the
it's
adjustment?
just one waiver in addition to the 14
Okay.
provisos.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for staff or the applicant? If not, I'm looking for a motion.
Docket 06823 to approve at per staff recommendation.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion? Now we'll call the vote. Zoning docket 06823 passes. Thank you. Next up is zoning docket 06923.
So this is a zoning change affecting a parcel in the lower coast of Algiers, located on Stanton Road, just off of its intersection with English Strand Parkway. The property is a large site, nearly 16 acres in size. The property owner intends to develop it with a single family residence, kind of matching the kind of rural estate style of residential development that is found in lower coast Algiers. However, this is not allowed under the current zoning. The current zoning is neighborhood commercial, which does not allow residential development. And so the application, which was initiated by council action, is to rezone it to the rural residential district that includes much of the surrounding area within the lower coast of Algiers to apply to the site as well. This kind of gets at a larger issue that is being discussed in the context of the master plan. Despite the fact that lower coast Algiers is pretty rural and largely undeveloped in places, it since the 1970s has had zoning that contemplates suburban style commercial and multifamily development that has never actually come to be developed. And so as part of the upcoming master plan amendments, there are several council initiated applications that, like this one, would sort of create more restrictive master plan designations that only allow for rural residential development. And so this basically is consistent with what you'll be seeing as part of the master plan process, but gets ahead of it in terms of being an application that predates what you'll see in the coming months as the master plan. The staff finds the zoning change to be approvable, though this has a commercial designation under the master plan. The narrative description of that designation does allow for single family residential development. And this is a zoning change that essentially achieves that ability to do single family residential development. So it's basically implementing the master plan through a residential zoning district rather than a commercial district, but in a way that is consistent with the master plan's objectives. And so given that, the staff recommends approval of the application.
Thank you. We have one comment card and support, Lee Dupont.
Lee Dupont, 12805 River Road. I'm the president of the Lower Coast Algiers Association. We represent all of Algiers below the intercoastal waterway, including residents of English Turn, the Arbors, and everyone outside the gated communities. We wholeheartedly support the zoning change. It is consistent with the master plan and will align the property with current low density land use patterns and the city's inability to provide the necessary infrastructure and safety and quality of life amenities. Lower Coast Algiers does not currently have infrastructure to support high density development. Except for the gated communities, there are literally no city sewers. Every property owner must install private septic plants, which then discharge into the open ditches that line the streets. Water supply is problematic. Twice last week, a small break in a water line in a remote area necessitated a complete shutoff of all water to the lower coast of Algiers for 12 hours and a boil water notice. Only two streets, Highway 406 and English Turn Parkway, are fully paved. All other streets are partially blacktopped or gravel. There are no sidewalks, no public parks, no fire station, no police substation. This is a low density residential zoning. It's the most appropriate zoning for this parcel. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We don't have any other comment cards. Is there a question for Mr. Dupont or the staff? If not, I'll look for a motion.
I move for approval of zoning docket 69-23 as recommended by staff.
Retrieval second.
There's no further discussion. We'll vote our machine. The motion passes. Have a good one. Next up is zoning docket item 07023.
Zoning docket 07023 is a conditional use request to permit the retail sale of packaged alcoholic beverages in a CBD5 urban core neighborhood lower intensity mixed use district. The conditional use would apply to the ground floor of a building that previously housed a FedEx store and is proposed to be leased by Kales LLC as an alcohol, wine, liquor, and gourmet prepackaged food store. The staff's analysis for the retail sale of packaged alcoholic beverages focuses on how alcoholic beverage sales as a land use matter intersect with the zoning objectives in the comprehensive zoning ordinance and the land use goals of the city's master plan. The proposed sale of alcoholic beverages is sensible as it aligns with the commercial purpose of the zoning designation. The sale of packaged alcoholic beverage is not otherwise inherently different from the sale of other food or drink products and can be appropriate if responsibly managed. Retail alcohol beverage sales are not specifically addressed by the site's master plan future land use designation. However, it is not inconsistent with that designation. For these reasons, the staff recommends approval of zoning docket 07023 subject to one proviso.
Thank you. So we have two applicant cards. Could you state your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, good afternoon. Chip Lyons, 201 St. Charles, New Orleans, Louisiana, here on behalf of the applicant. I think we have a couple of different cards from the applicants and they're willing to see their time to if necessary.
So to you, okay.
Yes, sir.
How much? So you'll have a total time of 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So good afternoon again. Chip Lyons here on behalf of the applicants. Applicants are the property owner, Peter Traplin, members of the Bandana family, as well as the operator, Kale LLC, which is owned by Mr. Zoran Bazar, who's also here in support, as well as the project architect, Miles Martin, if you guys have any questions. We appreciate the staff recommendation. The staff has found that it meets the proposed use of the property is consistent with the master plan, that it meets the conditional use criteria. We don't have any additional comments on the staff report. I want to provide just a little bit of additional context. As noted by staff, this would be a conditional use application for the retail sale of packaged alcohol beverages at a site that used to be occupied by Kinko's at the corner of St. Charles and Julia. This is a ground level retail store, just ground level only, selling high-end alcohol and prepackaged gourmet food. There will be no on-site consumption of alcohol and no on-site food preparation. Everything's prepackaged. It's going to be a high-end liquor store. In the operator's lease agreement with the landlord, they've agreed not to sell any sub-premium liquor brands. They've also agreed not to sell vaping products, CBD products, or similar products. So again, the idea is to bring in high-end product that would be attractive to residences in the area who could, residents in the area who could walk to the store to get either high-end alcohol products, cigars, or prepackaged gourmet food. There won't be any, because there won't be any on-site food preparation. There won't be any issues with garbage or issues like that. It's not going to be a bar. These will be high-end products designed for people to come in and buy, take back to their residences in the area and consume there, not on site. We've received letters of support from several neighbors. We're also aware of the written opposition of the Lafayette Square Association. By way of background, prior to scheduling the NPP for this site and reaching out to the city, we reached out to the Lafayette Square Association leadership, had an informal meeting with them. We've offered to enter into a good neighbor agreement with the Lafayette Square Association. That good neighbor agreement is based on one that the association entered into with Keefe's, which is a wine store at the corner of Howard and Carondelet. So that good neighbor agreement would, if the association is willing to enter into it, would replicate the use restrictions in the lease so that both the landlord and the association would have the ability to enforce those. It would include some restrictions on the operator's ability to sell the property or sell the operation. So the good neighbor agreement would actually go beyond the conditional use restrictions. And again, we're willing to do that. We've offered that to the neighborhood association. We've included some additional changes to it at their request. We haven't heard back from them on that, but certainly we're willing to happy to continue dialogue with the neighborhood association. We look forward to being a good neighbor and a positive addition to the neighborhood. So we would appreciate your support of the application and certainly happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more card for Chip.
That's me.
I'm sorry. Peter Traplin, you want to speak?
Yes, thank you. Peter Traplin. My residential address is 917 Magazine Street. So I also reside in the Lafayette Square neighborhood. And we purchased this property in 1985. And at that time, this neighborhood still had remnants of Skid Row. And a lot of these sort of conditional uses date back to that time when, as businesses closed, bars, flop houses, blood banks, all that type of use, they did not want anyone to try to step in and reopen any of those type of businesses because of the effort to try to improve that neighborhood. You know, as everyone knows, that neighborhood has gone a long way since then. As a matter of fact, you know, there've been over, close to 200 apartments built diagonally across the street from this site. It's a heavily residential neighborhood. when we developed this building in 85, 86, we put in one of the very early residential units in that neighborhood. Now I believe there are over 5,000 residential units, you know, in the surrounding area. So anyway, I think like Chip said, I'm a resident in the neighborhood. I don't want to see bad things happen in the neighborhood, which is why when we were crafting the lease, I put in restrictions in the lease to make sure that this would be, you know, what they said it would be, which is a higher end retail sales business and not your like 7-Eleven, Circle K type of business that sells a lot of lower end products. And as a matter of fact, if someone wants that lower end product, all they have to do is go to the Exxon station at Lee Circle and they can find it there. These are lower end and smaller alcohol type of products. So anyway, I encourage you to please vote yes for it. And if I can answer any questions, I'll be happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. We have, actually, we have one more card. We have one more card from Miles Martin.
Hello, Miles Martin, 3328 Bank Street, Louisiana. As the architect of record, I just wanted to stand up here and say, looking forward to this project and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We have three cards or two cards in opposition with one seat at time. First up, Mahal Duplancher. Oh, that's Michael. Oh, sorry.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's Michael Duplantier. Before I made my comments, I have some prepared remarks, but as a point of order, if I may make that, in the preliminary staff report, I'm aware of at least 6 comments made from residents and property owners in the immediate area that are not in the staff report. I'm not sure how that happened. I think some of them probably were not sent to the CPC info address, but they were sent, and I did check, Robert, they were all sent to the director going back to late July of this year, and none of them were entered into the staff report. They really should be. I mean, those people submitted those comments in lieu of coming to this meeting today in some cases. So I don't know how we handle that, but it is an inadequate report in terms of content at this point.
One second. Director Rivers.
So I'm checking my emails right now.
Okay.
How many did you say? And do you have
But
the
I
name?
counted at least, 6 different letters, but 5 different people. One sent 2 letters. And some of them, as I said, I didn't bring the list with me, and I don't want to use their names because I'm not really authorized to use their names. But I know some of them go back to July 26th, and which raises a question in my mind. I don't want to belabor this, but a question about when does the open period start in terms of commenting? Some of these comments were made, many of them were made after the last public meeting, but well in advance of this meeting. And they just didn't make it into the record. Now you can either take my word for that, or we can ask that we supplement this record with those comments if the commission would permit that.
So let me say this, when applications move from here to the city council, anything that we're aware of that didn't make it into the record does get added to the record. Usually those are ones that come in late, but in this case, seems like they were ahead of the deadline. I would go ahead and stipulate from the staff's perspective that those are there.
Yeah.
I'll scour my emails and make sure that they do get into the record.
Okay. That's fine. On the merits here, I have some comments. It's more of a legal nature, given my background, although I'm no longer practicing law. But this ordinance, the zoning ordinance, provides that conditional uses have what it calls unique characteristics. Although the staff report for this application does not treat these kind of uses or this use as unique, but in fact, it uses the word sensible, which is not in the zoning ordinance, by the way. And also and I'm quoting here, not inherently different from permitted retail uses. Well, I mean, that's a pretty fundamental area. By definition, a conditional use is not a permitted use. It is unique and it cannot be treated as not inherently different from permitted uses. If you want to amend the ordinance, go ahead and do it. But right now, this is not a permitted use. The uniqueness is what makes it conditional. Also, these applications are required to be evaluated on the basis of all information submitted. Now, the phrase all information submitted is interesting to me because it doesn't really say submitted by whom, right? But I have to conclude that it's the burden of the applicant to prove that his application is meritorious. It's not up to the staff to find reasons why it should be granted or shouldn't be granted. So I think all information submitted is submitted by the applicant. And it shouldn't be based on what I consider to be frankly subjective opinions and unresearched conclusions by the commission staff. And this report is replete with unresearched conclusions and subjective opinions. And in reviewing the standards, I just want to comment about this as well. The report relies primarily on consistent. I'm running short on time. If you grant me some additional time, we only have 2 speakers and we have 10 minutes.
That's your time.
I just have another minute or
So
two.
we have 2 others. We have 2 other speakers. If
In opposition,
yes.
we will not. Kathleen, will you grant me two additional minutes?
Could you?
Thank you.
I would like to, if it's okay, I would like for Mr. Duplanche to complete his remarks.
Okay.
For just another minute.
She had,
that okay?
I think,
I mean,
Kathleen. Yes, had already stated her time, so you have.
Okay, I don't want to drone on endlessly here, but here's the thing. It relies on consistency with the master plan. Obviously, a conditional use has to be consistent. However, in this case, the staff admits that the master plan does not address the issue of alcoholic beverages. Yet they argue since retail is permitted under the master plan for this neighborhood, and this is a retail location, it's therefore consistent with the plan. Frankly, that's ridiculously circular logic and it's a fatuous conclusion. Also, the staff report conveniently ignores the requirement, and it is a requirement that there be a public need for this particular use at this particular location. The report doesn't address that at all. And that's a threshold requirement for an application that in fact circumscribes the approval standards. This is up top above the approval standards, and yet is not addressed at all. Also, the character and integrity requirement, which is a requirement, is addressed with a simple statement that the standard is met. Yeah, really? By whom? Finally, the report concludes that retail alcohol is not inherently detrimental to the public welfare. At least, and they qualify that statement by saying, as long as it's appropriately managed to minimize operational impacts. All right, here's the question. Who ensures the appropriate management, right? Once the application is granted, nobody. Certainly not this commission or the staff of the commission or the NOPD. It's left up to the neighbors to complain when there's not appropriate management at an alcohol beverage outlet. The corollary to that, if it's inappropriately managed or not appropriately managed, then it does have detrimental impacts on the neighborhood. I mean, if you're going to make one statement, you got to make the corollary statement as well, which they failed to do. So I would argue that this application is fundamentally flawed and does not meet what I think is a very high burden of application for a conditional use. And as a result of that, I request that this commission reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more card in opposition, Robert Vosby.
Good afternoon, Robert Vosby. I live at 730 St. Charles Avenue. I'm here as the president of the condominium association located at 730 St. Charles Avenue, comprised of about 10 units. But as Mr. Duplanche, I endorse everything Mr. Duplanche said, but I would have to say to argue that this packaged liquor store is not detrimental to what we're trying to do in our neighborhood. This is a residential neighborhood, and we have Lafayette Square on one side, and then we have the underpass with a lot of people over there. One
block away from this location, there is another convenience store that does sell packaged liquors. So my question is, why would we want to allow a second when we're trying? Why do we want a second packaged liquor store? We have problems from the first one. When you sell packaged liquors, people get them in bags and they have a tendency to hang out. This is what we're trying to fight in this neighborhood, not allow more of that. And I just want you to imagine, it's very easy to say the staff approve this, but I ask each one of you to think about it. If your residential neighborhood was all of a sudden, forced upon it to have packaged liquor stores just right there in the center of everything, and you could avoid it, why wouldn't you avoid it when there's already one there? So I ask you to give significant consideration to that, because we've been fighting like crazy to keep this residential neighborhood safe and have the historic charm that has drawn people to the neighborhood. We're succeeding in doing that. We don't want to give up all the advances we made by allowing this sort of use. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have no more comment cards. The applicant has a total of 6 minutes for rebuttal. So you have 2 minutes to start.
Thank you, Chip Lyons here on behalf of the applicant. I just want to state a few things in response to the comments. One, we've submitted a package that goes through each of the criteria in section 4.3F of the CZO with regard to standards for meeting conditional use. The staff has as well. The staff has found, we've submitted written material demonstrating why we believe we meet those criteria. The staff agrees. The primary criteria is to evaluate the impact of the conditional use and compatibility of the use with surrounding neighborhoods and ensure the appropriateness of the use at a particular location. Again, this is a retail use in a mixed use neighborhood with both retail, ground level retail businesses, residential uses in the neighborhood. This is what we're proposing to do. We believe it's consistent with the master plan. The sort of reference as a sort of, packaged liquor store is a little bit, I think, believe of a stereotype. And I think that, again, what we are proposing to put in here is sale of high-end alcohol products, sale of prepackaged gourmet food. We think there's a demand for this in the neighborhood, and we don't think that what we're proposing to do would have an adverse effect on the neighborhood. We think it would be an added convenience for residents of the neighborhood. With regard to the opposition of the association says, well, who's going to enforce this? We've offered to enter into a good neighbor agreement with the association to tell them, this is what we're going to do. If we don't do it, you can come try and move to rescind the conditional use. They would essentially have a cause of action against the operator. So we've offered that. And the response is, we just oppose it altogether. So we've done, I think, everything we can do to respond to the concerns of the neighbor associations. We've offered a good neighbor agreement. We've offered revisions to the good neighbor agreement in response to comments from the neighborhood association, and their response is just to say, no, we oppose it. And so again, I believe that from the CZO perspective, and as evidenced by the staff report, that we meet the criteria for conditional use. We want to be good neighbors. We want to work with the neighborhood association. That's what we've been doing. And again, we're happy to continue to do that. And we would appreciate your support of this conditional use application.
Thank you. So public comment portion is now closed. Are there any questions for the applicant or staff?
I have a question for staff. I'm having a little technical difficulty getting to the report up here. So we typically put provisos in about when there are liquor uses. Can you tell me what the provisos are?
So
that we put in so far?
Yeah, I can say
y'all put in?
that we, as a staff, typically only include that which is in the city code. And so the city code includes limitations that are, have to do with the display area for alcohol, the wholesale cost of alcohol as a relation to other goods. And this is usually for, say, a grocery store that sells alcohol in addition to other things. And those restrictions kick in if somebody is within a block of a school or some other public facility. They don't kick in here. And because they're not required by the city code, the staff is not recommending it as part of this approval.
So I'm recalling, I don't know the specific ones, but I'm recalling some provisos about making sure that alcohol isn't consumed like in the immediate area and cleaning up trash around it. I'm recalling some,
I think,
dockets where
I
we,
think what you're recalling are the provisos that are usually added with respect to bars.
right,
So there would be security plans, there would be the types of, go cup
right,
language and all of that. Those typically are not something that are because there's no on-site consumption.
right. But we could, as a, we can do it for a bar, we could do it for a conditional use for a package store, couldn't we?
You certainly can add
Okay,
provisos, absolutely.
okay.
I have a question. We've heard from the applicant, which sounds, fine, that this will be high-end spirits or wines and gourmet packaged foods. But I don't think the conditional use itself distinguishes those particular products. So what is and I guess this is sort of in line with what Commissioner Steve is there's really nothing we can do once this conditional use is granted to limit it to what this applicant in particular, the types of products.
So I think what you can do is limited in ways that you can clearly define. For example, the council has said, has attached provisos to test applications that don't allow the sale of containers that are less than 700 milliliters, which the thought being, you can sell a bottle of wine, you can't sell, a single serving container.
Mr. Good, what was that limit? Can you give that again? I didn't hear it.
50 milliliters, I think, is the standard wine bottle. Things like premium versus sub-premium, I don't, as a matter of zoning, I don't know how you could define those or distinguish between the two. And so, it's certainly neighborhood organizations will routinely enter into good neighbor agreements, and they may make those distinctions as they will, but it's not something that's typically done through the zoning ordinance.
Can I follow up on that, Commissioner Brown? So two things we could do, and I'm asking for confirmation of that, is we could attach a proviso for no on-premises consumption, right? I mean, we can do, I understand we can't have a proviso about the quality of the products, but we could add a proviso for no on-premises consumption, which we've heard the applicants say they're willing to do. And we could also add a proviso for no food preparation on site. Those are objective and we could add those. Okay.
Could we,
You, Kelly.
I guess we could also add to that the single serving,
Oh, yeah.
limits or prohibitions against single servings or pint size, whatever the.
Okay, are there any more questions for staff? Yeah,
Question with regard to good neighbor agreement. The applicant, the speaker for the applicant mentioned that they had proposed having a good neighbor agreement and added provisos that it would allow for recourse on the part of the neighborhood organization if they were not complying with it. To what is that? Is that a special permission given within a neighborhood, a good neighbor agreement that gives a right to a neighborhood organization to come before us?
Well, so generally the way good neighbor agreements are structured and, you know, it's not something the city is party to, so but it's a private agreement that is between the property owner and the neighborhood organization where, you know, there's an agreement that we will do A, B, and C, and if that agreement is violated, then this, you know, the neighborhood organization itself can sue to enforce the agreement as opposed to being solely reliant on the city doing a zoning enforcement. In other words, by entering into a separate agreement on the side, it gives the neighborhood organization something to enforce separately from the city.
Right, but their recourse to enforce it would be legal, a
Yes.
lawsuit. Okay, thank you.
Do you have those provisos or in the good neighbor agreement, what you had proposed in terms of no singles or?
Yeah, so again, in terms of the provisos that have been mentioned, no on premises consumption, no food prep on site, we're fine with those. We also have in the good neighbor agreement, I think, limits on serving size. We want to make sure that we're kind of specific on that so that there's not confusion on what's a single serving and what's not a single serving. So I think we want to have that we wouldn't sell anything smaller than 375 milliliters. Is that correct?
Can you give us the rest of the provisions in the good neighbor agreement?
Yeah, and again, you know, as Mr. Kroll pointed out, you know, we're happy to negotiate these with the neighborhood association.
Where I'm headed is that whichever of those provisions that we could impose, which some of them we can't,
right?
But the ones that are objective enough that we could, we might be interested in imposing if we knew all of them.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of them. You want to, so.
Can I make a motion to suspend the rules to ask Mr. Lyons to pass those up to us?
Yep.
I make that motion.
There's a second.
Which will second.
All in favor?
Okay, so I'm just going to sort of go through a summary. So it's going to be, again, some of the ones we've already talked about, that sale of alcoholic beverages is limited to upscale, you know, premium brands, no sub-premium. Mr. Kroll said you can't really do that. Specialty food items, and we talk about the kind of specialty food items we would sell. Some of the stuff we've covered, all alcoholic beverage sales will be exclusively for off-premises consumption. We've offered the neighborhood association that not less than 30% of our shelf space would be for the sale or display of food items. So at least 30% of shelf space would be food items. I'm not sure if that's something that you guys can get into or not, but that's okay with us. We have business hours of 10 to 10, but open until midnight on Friday and Saturday. The neighborhood association had not agreed to that. They had pushed back on that. Our position is that midnight on Friday and Saturday is consistent with restaurant operating hours in that zoning district. We have that there won't be any video poker on site. Signage will conform with CZO requirements, which we would do anyway. And we'll ensure that trash pickup occurs on a regular basis in conformity with what other commercial businesses do. Those are the, and no on-site sampling of, well, actually, we're fine with no on-site consumption. There was some language in here, sorry, to go on a digression about on-site sampling. That came from Keefe's, which is a wine store. We're not doing wine tastings. We're not doing tastings. We're fine, again, with no on-site consumption. So I believe that covers the operating restrictions that we offered to the neighborhood association and were willing to include, to the extent they're appropriate as provisos in a conditional use ordinance, to include those as provisos in the conditional use ordinance. Thank you.
Were there any discussions on leasing the sidewalk for sidewalk seating or anything like that?
No, I mean, I think that, we're certainly happy to, agree to keep the area adjacent to our premises clean and clean it on a regular basis. Again, we don't expect people to be hanging out on the sidewalk there because that's not what the use would encourage, but we're certainly happy to include some language that will keep the immediate area clean and free of litter and trash. That's not a
And I'm
problem.
talking about really sidewalk seating,
So,
or
I'm sorry, sidewalk
application for sidewalk seating.
seating. No, so we wouldn't have any sidewalk seating because there's not going to be really any on premises consumption.
Okay, I just want to be specific about that because that can really, be a source of noise for neighbors after certain hours if they bought liquor or bought wine and had a seat, at the outside the store.
We're not going to have, there's really not going to be any seating indoor or outdoor at the location because that wouldn't be part of the use.
Okay.
Are there any more questions for the staff of the applicant? If not, I'm looking for a motion.
I'm going to ask my fellow commissioners for help if there are provisos I leave out. So I'm going to move for approval, but subject to the following provisos, which I'm just going to state generally so that, and ask staff to draft appropriate language. 1, no on-premises consumption of food or alcohol. 2, no food preparation, sale of pre-prepared food only. 3, that the applicant enforce a plan to keep the area adjacent outside to the premises clean. 4, the applicant have a plan to assure that there's no consumption of alcohol immediately adjacent to the premises. Now, I realize that means somebody can walk out and drink on the way out, but to ensure no loitering or gathering for the consumption of alcohol immediately outside of the premises. I've lost track of numbers. That there be a plan for that there be beverages sale of units no less than, and I forgot to have a discussion. The applicant wanted 375, but Mr. Kroll, you told us that usually we have 750.
That's been done in the past. I don't say usually because it doesn't come up routinely enough.
Okay, so I'm going to start with 750 in my motion. And see if that gets a second or whatever. Next, that there be at least 30% of the shelf space of the operation for food. Next, that the hours of operation be 10 to 10, except allowing 10 till midnight on Friday and Saturday. Next, that there be no video poker. Next, that there be no seating either indoor or outdoor. Did I include one for keeping things clean outside? Yes. Okay. So that's all I have, but I would greatly accept additions if I've left anything out or anything that another commissioner wants to add if they're inclined to want to add proviso.
Commissioner Steve, could you repeat the ones after the hour of operation one, which I think was number 7?
No video poker and no seating indoor or outdoor.
Is there a second?
And 750 is a bottle of wine. So you wouldn't be able to sell crafts or half bottles, or like how they make the smaller ones with this motion.
Not under the motion.
So
Just for clarification, this is 500.
Okay.
I don't know if we're allowed to have discussion in the middle of a motion that hasn't been seconded. But I'd be, if it takes having to be seconded to then have more discussion, is that right? Because I'd like to hear from the applicant in terms of the
I'll
volume.
second for discussion. I'll second the motion.
Sure.
Okay, so then,
Discussion is open. Is there?
so do I need to
Mhm.
suspend rules to ask Mr. Lyons to comment about the size?
You can just ask him.
We could just ask a question.
Can you comment about the size?
Yeah, sure, thank you. And again, I think that the idea is to avoid the sale of what are known as sort of singles or I can't remember what the other kind of terminology is. The 375 is because you can have a 375 milliliter small bottle of Johnny Walker Black or some high-end high-end liquor that's being bought. So I guess the issue is, in our mind, is the product being sold, not so much the size of it. Again, we're not going to be selling the type of size liquor that you would get on an airplane, right? Or used to be able to get on an airplane. But 375 is a little is larger than that. It's not the sort of sip single type size. It's a little larger, and it's not, it's a size that high-end spirit purveyors use. It's a fairly common size that's out there. If you go to other liquor stores that are, high-end liquor stores, Martin's, other high-end liquor stores, you will find them selling those size containers.
So I'm remembering from my high school days, pints and half pints, and I just looked up how many milliliters in a pint, which is 473. So 375 would allow somebody to sell a pint, which seems kind of small to me. I don't know if the rest of the commissioners, I don't want to have a motion that fiddles with that. But so as Executive Director Rivers said, this is 500 milliliters. So I just hate to see a sales of a pint. So I could go in a motion. I guess I can amend my own motion if it gets seconded. I don't know whether to go down to 500 or leave it at 750.
We have a motion and a second, so we could vote and then go
Okay,
from there.
let's do that then. Because I really have hesitant to go to 375, which would allow a pint. I think we're trying to.
For purpose of discussion, 375 is half a bottle of wine or a small bottle of gin or a small bottle of vodka or a small bottle of tequila. So just, that is 375 ml. And if they want to sell 375 ml, I think they're allowed to do that because it's high in alcohol. I don't know if we're over restricting that, that with them, but
Okay, so I'll amend my motion. Since my second, I assume is going to accept the amendment, to go from 750 to 375.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
If there's no further discussion, we'll vote our machine. Uh-oh.
Steve, can you?
A second, yeah.
Okay, zoning docket passes. Good luck.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Steig,
Commissioner Steve?
did you, it's Stephen down here. You.
I thought there was Commissioner Wittry yelling at me again.
Yeah, did you land at 375?
I did.
Okay, next up is zoning docket 07123.
Zoning docket 7123 is a request for a conditional use to permit the modest expansion of an existing non-conforming Mardi Gras den for the Crew of Tucks located at the corner of Washington Avenue and South Lopez Street. The proposed warehouse is to provide more workspace for existing staff on site. Staff does not believe that the proposal will increase the demand for off-street parking, increase traffic, or otherwise intensify the use of the site. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the request subject to 3 provisos. Staff also acknowledges there is an error in the report. which states there are 5 provisos on page 2 and 10. However, there are only 3.
Thank you. We have one card from the applicant, Miles Granderson.
Miles Granderson, 800 Barone, representing the applicant. First, I'd like to thank staff for the report, which recommends approval. This is a simple one. We shouldn't take as long as the last one. The CZO provides for expansion of certain non-conforming industrial uses. 25-3G2 is the site. This fits perfectly into the intent of that provision. This has been the float den for the crew of Tux since 2015. Prior to that, the captain of Tux believes it was used for a little bit of time by Kern for various floats. And before that, it was an industrial warehouse for many years. As a staff report notes, it's not surrounded by any residential uses, so the impact is low. We had no negative feedback from our NPP meeting. I held a meeting at the Broadmoor Association and there were no attendees. And to my knowledge, there isn't any concern with this. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think this one may be fairly straightforward.
Thank you. There are no other comment cards in support or in opposition. Is there any question for the applicant or staff? If not, looking for a motion.
Make a motion to approve that recommendation with the correction of 3 provisos.
I'll second the motion.
Is there any further discussion? If not, we'll vote on machines. Docket item passes. Good luck. Next up is subdivision docket 09219.
Subdivision dockets 09219 has to do with 86 properties in Algiers. When the 86 subject properties were developed with 2-family dwellings in the late 2000s, the developer was not aware that either a surveying error or a field measuring error resulted in the siting of the rights of ways of the then unimproved Jennifer, Kathleen, and Amanda Streets being 25 feet west of where they were actually and originally platted. Consequently, the lots along those rights of way were also erroneously believed to be 25 feet farther west than they were actually and originally platted. The miscited rights of way were improved with infrastructure and paving, and the lots along those streets were eventually developed before the 25-foot discrepancy was discovered. The result of the error is that the structures built on the west, the odd number sides of Jennifer, Kathleen, and Amanda Street are all encroaching into the public right of way, and each of the dwellings built on the east, the even numbered sides of those of Jennifer and Kathleen Streets, straddles their respective rear lot lines and encroach into the rear yard of the abutting lot to the rear. Purpose of this request is to revise the city's street rights of ways and parcel maps to reflect the actual location of the subject streets and lots. The CZO and subdivision regulations give the City Planning Commission the authority to approve subdivision applications, but not the ability to grant any variances that may be needed to address dimensional deficiencies or other nonconformities. Nearly all of the subject lots are deficient in at least one dimension, and normally the CPC's action on such subdivision requests is contingent on separate variance approvals from the Board of Zoning Adjustments. However, yesterday, the applicant informed the staff that the Department of Safety and Permits determined several years ago that no variances would be needed for this request because the nonconformities are grandfathered. The staff has since then learned that a later determination by the Department of Safety and Permits has said that yes, variances are needed for this case. This later determination has come within the past 3 weeks, as opposed to the one that the applicant cited from several years ago. Accordingly, the staff recommends approval of subdivision docket 9219, subject to the provisos in the staff report.
Thank you. We have one card, from the applicant, Mike Sherman.
Hey, good morning, Commissioner. Good afternoon. Mike Sherman, 800 Barone. Really proud to be here on New Orleans, Louisiana. Really proud to be here on behalf of Momus Partners. I saw with great interest some of the eye rolls as you were hearing this matter. The question today is how to unscramble an egg. First, what a phenomenal development. 60 affordable homes, deeply affordable, 20 to 60% of the AMI, an incredibly healthy community that was created out of an area where there was nothing. There were not even streets. There were only paper streets sitting on top of grass. The developer did a phenomenal job creating a healthy community to serve citizens between 20 and 60% of the area median income with a great clubhouse. The surveyor started the plot 25 feet in the wrong area. So the paper streets versus the real streets are 25 feet off. The homes versus the lots of record are 25 feet off. We've worked with Sewage and Water Board, Entergy, Real Estate and Records, Public Works, every department imaginable, and have gotten to this incredible posture today where we stand before you as a co-applicant with the City of New Orleans, or a co-applicant, and a recommendation of tentative approval from staff. So my request today is please allow us to move forward with our approval on the re-subdivision. And we will see you again on a land swap because we need to swap that 25 feet of private property for 25 feet of city property in the coming months to finish off this process. I do have one request on the variance. We've had a lot of staff changeover at the city over the course of a number of years working through this. Change in the zoning administrator, a change in different city personnel. Proviso number 2 suggests we're required to have variances. And we look forward to meeting with the zoning administrator and the chief zoning official. Ms. Becknell and I had some back and forth, and we had some open email chains from Mr. Kindle, who I know we saw here tonight or today in his private capacity. So here's my only request. Please approve it as recommended by staff, but on proviso 2, rather than requiring variances, it's variances, comma, if required by safety and permits. So if safety and permits determines we need a variance, will be before the BZA. If safety and permits determines there's an existing non-conforming use, which is what we believe, then we won't have a proviso requiring variances that don't exist. The email, the person handling this from a few years ago was Mr. Kindle, and the email chain dropped off that Ms. Becknell and I determined. So we're going to meet with safety and permits in the coming days. So our request today is tentative approval. And if the City Planning Commission would feel it's appropriate, we would ask proviso 2 to be modified, that we would obtain variances, comma, if required by safety and permits.
Thank you.
I would just say, Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, but even if the language were to stay the same, if the determination of the City Planning Commission staff don't have the authority to determine whether a variance is required. So if there's a determination coming from the Department of Safety and Permits that no variance is required, we would just deem that proviso to be satisfied.
With that in the record, you've satisfied our request, Mr. Rivers. We appreciate that. I would just say on the record, if we do have to go for a variance, we would be grateful if it could be a single variance, not 80.
Again, that would be a determination for safety and permits.
We appreciate it. Happy to answer any questions.
We have one more card. In opposition, Juan Molina.
Hi, my name is Juan Molina, 4315 Cleveland Avenue, New Orleans. I'm here speaking for my mother, Jennifer Molina, who is an owner of Square 53 lots 38 through 42, one of the adjacent properties to the development proposed for re-subdivision. And my family owns about 50% of one adjacent property. We have a few concerns about the request. We received a hearing notice this last week and attempted to dig into this issue as much as possible over the last few days. But, as was mentioned, this issue does seem incredibly complicated. There are pages and pages of documents. There are multiple surveys. The owners don't feel like they've had enough time to dig into the issue with the adjacent property and are concerned about the potential impact of this request if approved on our title. We have two issues. There seems to be a discrepancy between the application and other materials such as exhibits offered by the applicant in their application and statements made by the applicants in a lawsuit against the original surveyor of the development. The application says that this alleged surveyor error caused the development to be erroneously built 25 feet to the west. But then the surveys and the lawsuit indicate that the development was perhaps erroneously built 25 feet to the east. These two surveys seem to be in conflict with each other, and we've not had enough time ourselves to review the surveys, perhaps consult with counsel, do our own surveys on this issue and see what the effects may be on our property. We ask that the commission defer this request until the property owners have time to allay their concerns with further research, consultations with counsel or other experts, and potentially after having an opportunity to speak with commission staff and with the applicants themselves. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. So the applicant has a chance to rebut.
Yeah, so
Before you rebut, what is the deadline?
It's on deadline, so you would have to act today unless the deadline was extended by the applicant.
that was my concern. We'd ask for this to move forward. I can say this is a great thing for those property owners. They had no access to water, no access to sewer, no access to power, and no street. Their properties were sitting on paper streets. Now, as you can see, there's a real street with real water, real sewer, real power. This only benefits every one of those private property owners, but there's even something better. Once this tentative approval is issued pursuant to proviso number 1, we have a substantial amount of work over the next several months to do before we could be in a place to move forward with a land swap right before this commission. So I look forward to exchanging informations with that private property owner's representative. We'd ask for your support, and this resub does not get recorded until we have all the approvals and come back to the City Planning Commission a second time on the land swap, in which case everything takes place simultaneously. So we ask for your support to move this forward. It's on deadline, and on the record, you have my commitment. We'll exchange information to make sure any private property owner interested has a chance to meet with us and have their concerns resolved prior to anything being recorded.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant or staff?
I'm trying to understand the land swap. What are you proposing?
Sure. If we refer to the exhibit here. So a paper street on paper looks like an actual street, but in real life, it's just grass, indistinguishable from private lots. We have now built real streets that are 25 feet off from where the paper street said the street should have been located. So what the land swap will do, which is not before you today, that'll be in a few months, is for the developer to provide the city property so that the street is now wholly owned by the city. And then there's portions of the structures that sit on what should have been a street. So we're gonna swap with the city so that those portions are now privately owned. So the land swap is the developer giving to the city the portion of properties where the street should be and receiving from the city the portions of property where there are structures. We are the only developments of actual development on all sides of us to the behind, left and right. It's undeveloped paper subdivisions. We're the first development in the area.
So there are houses sitting currently on city property.
Correct.
So I'm just curious, just a matter of how did title get cleared for like the purchase?
There's never been a sale.
Okay,
Yeah, so the property was owned by the developer.
okay.
It's affordable housing development. The developer constructed the improvements, and the developer has never sold the property to a third party.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any more questions for the applicant or staff? If not, I'm looking for a motion. Is there a motion?
Okay, I move for, recommendation for approval of, subdivision docket 9219. And, just with the understanding that for, the person who addressed a concern that they will have opportunity to both, have their questions answered as guaranteed by the applicant and to, have another chance at, speaking in public in objection to it before a final decision is made.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, we'll vote our machines. Okay, subdivision docket passes. Congratulations. Let's see. Next up is subdivision docket 10223.
Subdivision docket 102-23 is a request to re-subdivide lots 1 and 22 into lots 1A at 21 and 37 3rd Street and 2520 Loyola Avenue. The request is to create an irregular L-shaped lot by combining lots 1 and 22. Existing lot 1 is developed with a one-story single-family dwelling. Lot 22 is adjacent to the rear yard of lot 1 and the property is currently vacant. The applicant has not submitted any specific plans for the development of the lot. While the subdivision regulations do not allow for non-rectangular lots, the staff recognizes that there are circumstances where a slightly irregular lot shape is desirable for practical reasons. However, major L-shaped configurations where the dogleg portion exceeds 15%, as represented with this request, will not be acceptable in general, although exceptions can be made when there are special circumstances that justify the lot shape. The staff cannot support this application because it is not a minor L shape. In this proposal, the new L shape has an interior lot that is approximately 77% well above the 15% threshold based on square footage of the overall area. Because the lot is above the acceptable threshold, there is a major deviation from the rectangular lot pattern, and then therefore does not result in an improvement of the existing lot. Therefore, the staff is not supportive of the applicant's proposed configuration and recommends denial of the proposed re-subdivision.
Thank you. We have one card in support from the applicant, Winton Yates.
Good afternoon, Winton Yates, 2139 3rd Street. My wife just walked in. And to address the what the staff is recommending for a denial, is this was actually part of an L-shaped lot for the home that was directly behind us in the same configuration. It was just the house behind us. He actually decided to sell that house, so he split the lots and sold the lots. We actually bought that lot because it sits right. So if it's our house, the lot, and then the house directly behind us on the corner, we actually bought that lot with the intention of keeping some out-of-state corporation from jamming a house right in between us over the backside of our house, because that's what's been happening in our neighborhood in Central City. So we actually purchased that lot with the intention of merging the lots and building an addition and turning that basically what is an alley into our backyard. We have two small ones that need more space. And if you see to the left in the picture, it's just us and my neighbor, Jeff, who's across the street, and his workshop across the street. So allowing us to actually build an addition, would not harm anyone in that alley. And we actually, when we purchased that lot, we approached each of our neighbors that lot runs behind and offered to actually sell them the backside of their lots. And they all said that it was okay that none of them are against us keeping that lot and actually doing something with it. Because as it stands right now, it's vacant and people my biggest issue right now with that lot is I spend my weekends removing tires that get dumped in that lot constantly. All I do is clean that lot out. The trash that gets dumped in there is absolutely ridiculous. So what we would like to do is actually build an addition on our house and turn it into usable, functional space for our family.
Thank you. Are there no other cards in support or in opposition? Are there any questions for the applicant or staff?
These lots were joined, then there would just be one main structure and then an addition. There couldn't be a separate structure that would be added on the longer lot. That,
Right, so if they're joined, then there could be an addition to the existing structure that, would go within 20 feet of Second Street rear property line, but there could not be a separate structure from that.
and this is a corner property, right? Yes, we all see that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
But the lot is not a corner. The lot is in red. Do you have a picture of the lot? Can you see? I can see it on my Google Maps, but I don't think we're allowed to do that.
And if you actually see the house that's directly to the left, that used to be that green, with the green roof, that was the exact same shape. We're just flipping it. So it doesn't really change anything. It just flips it to the other side. So the guy that owned that just split it and sold the house. So somebody's redoing the house and then he put the lot up for sale by itself. So it existed as an L-shaped lot before we got our hands on it, before it was just a singular lot.
So they re-subdivided that lot?
Correct.
Do we have I'm sure that's in the report, but is there history there?
We don't have a record of that.
I can tell you it was an L-shaped lot because when we purchased the house, we actually approached him to try to get that lot when we first bought the house and he didn't want to let it go. So when we found out that he subdivided the lots and put a for sale sign on it, we put an offer on it the next day. So I can tell you, it was an L-shaped lot before we got our hands on it.
Are you planning to expand on that lot?
Yes, like I was saying, we are planning to do an addition to the backside of our house and basically that lot you won't even know what's back there.
So your house would go all the way back and you would have some sort of a side yard?
No,
Well, we would adhere to the city's 15-foot offset, so there would still be space. There would still be 15 feet between what would be the backside and where that carport doesn't exist there anymore. Where that carport is, there's a fence there, so there'd still be 15 feet of space there.
A question for staff. So, this is a 28-foot, the back lot is 28-foot frontage on Loyola, correct? And is that,
I can tell you it's 27 feet wide, 150 feet deep. We just did a survey on it.
and that, the minimum lot size for that district, frontage, is it 30?
It is 30, yes. So that existing lot is slightly substandard in width.
It's substandard, but it is a general improvement.
Yeah, I'm saying the existing lot is substandard. I think it's up to the commission whether merging the two or not is a general
Okay.
improvement.
I would argue it's a substantial improvement for the,
Okay.
for our neighborhood.
Are there any other questions for staff or the applicant? Not, I'm looking for a motion.
I'll move to approve it, even though the staff has recommended denial. I'm reading it and it looks to me that but for just the one technical part of this, it is a general improvement.
Is there a second? Commissioner Steve seconds. Is there any further discussion? If not, we'll vote our machines. The subdivision passes.
No, I did not vote.
Oh. Oh, you did? Are you still?
No. I didn't vote.
Take your time.
Is the house on Third Street or Loyola?
Third Street, third.
Third Street,
Third Street. But you don't have your homestead exemption on Third Street?
not yet. We
You're
were
waiting to combine.
We were waiting to combine it to then do the homestead.
Okay, congratulations, subdivision passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. They're up again.
Next up is subdivision ratifications.
I have one more.
We have
Wait,
one more.
I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Next up is subdivision docket 11423. Is that?
Yeah, I'm confused.
Is,
Maybe that's a misprint.
Are you confused by the applicant?
Yes.
yes,
It's a typo.
okay.
See, I do read. Okay.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Subdivision docket 11423 for the property at 1600 Frenchman Street is a re-subdivision of lot S into lot S1 and lot S2 within the HUB1 Historic Urban Neighborhood Business District. This request is being reviewed according to Article 5, Section 5.1.a, reversal of lot frontage that states sidelines of a lot shall run at right angles to the street on which it faces as far as is practical. The subdivision involves a division of one lot, but with existing principal structures on each proposed new lot. The subdivision allows for the use of the property as an existing residential building type and an existing commercial building type, which would be unaffected by the subdivision. Both proposed lots meet the minimum lot area and width requirements as per Article 12, Section 12.3.8.1. As the existing commercial structure is built to face North Claiborne Avenue on a lot currently oriented towards Frenchman Street, the only way to put each principal structure on its own lot is to create one lot, proposed lot S2, facing North Claiborne Avenue. The subdivision does not interfere with the development objectives stated in the master plan and thus is consistent with the master plan. Based on this analysis, the staff concludes that the overall purpose of policy B is met and that the subdivision should be approved. We are seeking approval of subdivision 11423, subject to one proviso.
Oh, that's fine. We don't have any cards, but is the applicant present? Could you state your name and address for the record, please?
Hello, everybody. Vic Stelly, 4631 Bancroft Drive, New Orleans, Louisiana, 70122. I want to thank the staff for looking in depth in what we're doing as far as a family to keep the community vibrant and utilize our properties to help the community in the way that we've been doing over the last 40 years. So, any questions?
There are no other cards. Is there any question for the applicant or staff? If not, I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Witry, seconded by Commissioner Brown. Is there any further discussion? I'm sorry, Commissioner Alexander. I'm looking at you, thinking backwards. There's no further discussion. We'll vote our machines. Subdivision docket passes. Congratulations.
Thank you all. Take care.
Last up are subdivision ratifications.
And there is just a list of subdivisions that we believe are eligible for administrative approval, and you as commission would be ratifying that determination.
I'll make a motion to approve the subdivision ratifications.
There's a second.
I'll second.
Commissioner Alexander seconds. If there's no further discussion, we'll vote our machines. And subdivisions are ratified. I am looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.